Okay.
All right, my name's Jackie Porter, and I'm here with Gina Doyle to talk a little bit about artifacts. So first, we have this issue that we've been iterating on, which is where UI should explain if no JUnit report artifacts are available to populate the unit test report. So it looks like when this issue was created a year ago, we had a different API available, which is this build report result. And now we have this new API, which is more performant and uses less, I guess, compute power on the back end. And now we have to support that. This particular issue, though, sounds like there's still a problem with when there is something that's expired and people are expecting a result, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So the problem that I'm trying to understand is there are times when if you're looking at a pipeline, let me just go into this example project. So if I have this old pipeline that I triggered a year ago, and I go into the tests, I see a summary that looks like it's active because that's what all of our other ones look like. But then if I go into this specific test job, I guess we're calling this, but we're also calling it test case, I don't have anything here, but I don't know if that's because they're expired, but I don't know that from the UI. And my confusion is we're talking about this empty state, about like the fact that the job artifacts are expired, and that's why you can't see the test report. But then we also talk about a separate use case in general where there's this larger empty state. And I'm confused if maybe we're actually talking about two separate problems.
Yeah, like I don't think the graphic here is the graphic that like what Evan shared, I think is a general empty state graphic. I don't know if he is actually saying that we need to create a test report in this case.
Oh, okay.
Like he's explaining this is what this is the pattern of an empty state inside of our platform. So I think that's what he was saying. And then I think his suggestion after that was like, well, in the current thing that we're looking at in that jobs example, do we need to reframe what people are looking at here? Like, or do we need to have them see that there's actually no test report instead of test cases? Because when you go back in the previous view, this is the test job view, but when they click onto that job name, test JUnit report, they're looking to see the report details.
Right.
So I think that was what Evan's point was. And then he was just kind of making the clarification that this technically isn't an empty state because this is what an empty state looks like elsewhere in our product.
Okay. Okay. I was mixing that up. So, I mean, that helps me understand that better. The other thing that I wasn't sure of is when you have, in this case, since your artifacts are expired, is there a way to get those, to retrieve those, or are they deleted fully from like the UI?
Depends on how the user has it configured, if they're self-managed. And then if they're GitLab, I think we do have automatic deletion after like 30 days. So this one right here triggered 1 year, the artifacts would be gone. But I think about how are people going to configure this in self-managed, and some will always keep their artifacts and other people won't. So I don't know if we can actually like set up a rule that says retrieve old artifacts or not. Might delete them and some people might not. But I think Evan has this last suggestion in his latest comment a day ago that talks about adding specific text around test reports require job artifacts, but all artifacts are expired. Learn more, which I think is a great suggestion. And then we just need to have the front end validate that when they add that text, that this will only show when things are expired rather than not configured. Because then the second one would be more relevant.
Okay. Yes, agreed. And I can make that look more like an empty state to Evan's point. Okay. That answers my questions there.
Okay.
Thank you for going through that.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. I was like, I don't think he's saying that that's the right empty state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just so confused, but
I
yeah.
know it was definitely confusing. Okay. And then this next thing that we wanted to talk about was your general findings
Mhm.
on, and then it's loading for me right now. So give me a second. Okay. On the insights for research. So I think some things that we found that were really interesting that might be great for us to prioritize are what you created first, which was traceability. You already
Yes.
created that epic, and I've started hydrating that epic with additional issues that are from our backlog. So
Okay.
we have like a whole bunch of scope that fits into that. But I'll let you kind of speak and give your overview on what you think is most relevant, and then I can give some commentary on what I think is important for us to pursue this year.
Okay. Yeah, I think the traceability thing is the biggest, I would say. And like you said, I feel like a lot of things can combine in that, like whether it's changing the location of where artifacts are or just adding more metadata related to them so that people can then find them easier. The other things kind of overlap with other groups, which is a little tough. I think it might be good to maybe not even like make changes or propose changes to the product, and maybe just propose doing more research on some specific areas, because I still think that these span over so many different groups. It's kind of like I think the compliance thing could be really interesting to solve, but I don't know if we can go right into solving that because we really only had that information from one study.
Yeah, I think there's also this this market push around compliance and security. That means we have to maybe evaluate this in a couple of different problem validation cycles, because one is going to be how we want to support something like security workflows with our artifacts, and how then the other one is how do we want to help people do enforcement of certain artifact behavior treatments, which are really different audiences, really different personas, but they do appeal to the greater market need for how do we build security inside of applications. So I'm with you on that one. I wonder if there are some MVCs that are really directed toward the compliance work stream around audit reports for artifact actions, like downloading artifacts, running bulk deletes on artifacts, who's accessed an artifact, like doing audit logs.
Yeah.
Different artifact behaviors might help with the traceability and also meet the needs for compliance.
Yeah, that's true. Like having like an event log or something like that for artifacts. This also brings me back to the fact that we have a feature flag, the view of like all of your artifacts and under a feature flag right now.
Yeah.
And I think something like that would be useful, honestly, for a lot of the things that came up in this research, is just being able to see all the artifacts at once.
Let me see. Let me pull up our artifact traceability epic, because I have added several things here. So like, for example, I did add the display more meaningful information for artifacts page. And I think that this was the one that's the feature flag blocked issue. Yeah. So let me go ahead and add that blocking relationship. So I think you're right that like, there's opportunities in just the visibility portion that can help us accomplish some more things with compliance, which is great.
Yeah. One other thing that came up that I think was really interesting was it was like input and output of artifacts within a pipeline, like because usually artifacts are carried over between jobs. and they wanted to know which of your jobs are actually outputting an artifact and which one was like taking it in, basically. I thought that that was a really interesting problem to solve. Definitely hard, but I think visualizing that in some way could make it easier. This also relates to traceability, but make it easier to trace it back and find problems, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's this other thought around, let me think, there's this like parent-child pipelines and artifacts that has been like the biggest challenge for a lot of our users around how are pipelines passing artifacts. And the reason why it's a problem is because sometimes you can't see like when something has been triggered downstream, especially in like a dynamically generated child. And as a result, you there's no visual representation of that information. So going back to your point, like how do we help people visualize these dependencies? That's what this epic is about.
Okay.
But
I didn't realize that. Okay, cool.
well, and you shouldn't, because it's currently like nested across pipeline authoring and pipeline executions. There's no reason for you to know this. The only reason why we play a part in it is because of something like artifacts exposed, not working with child pipelines and read-child pipeline artifacts for MR reports, which is particularly like, which is our area. But some of these other issues like aren't even build artifacts related. Like some of them are literally pipeline authoring related. So it does make it a little tricky for us to think about. We have to figure out what use case we're really wanting to enable with that, with the dependency tracing of artifacts. If we think about it from a pipeline insights angle, are we looking to help debug or look at failures or do flaky test detection? Or are we helping people author pipelines faster? And if it's the authoring pipelines faster, then that might be more in the pipeline authoring use case. And we should suggest like Dove be the DRI of that front.
Yeah, I was thinking that the debugging would be the biggest use case for us, just with, because that aligns more with what I was looking at from the studies I looked through.
Yeah, debugging and triaging failures is like the number one thing that comes out of artifacts, which is why it was moved to testing. When we think about how people are interacting with artifacts, it's because they're there as a result of something going wrong with their jobs. And that's usually detected through testing, usually detected through logging and some sort of failure indication. So completely agree with that front.
Because I mean, this actually came up a little bit. Sorry, I'm going a little off topic because I just remembered we talked about storage and how artifacts impact storage. That was a small portion of what I saw come out of the research, but there was things about being able to maintain a low storage capacity, like automating deletion of artifacts, which I thought we already allowed, but maybe we only allow it at a certain level because they specifically were asking for applying rules at the instance level. And maybe being able to like manage the storage better than we're allowing today. This like completely connected with artifacts. I don't know, there's definitely more that goes into storage, but this one was specifically about artifacts.
It's a good call out. So as I start to think about artifacts and our storage, our push for storage mechanisms, we are leading our users there because they're going to get told that they have a limit that they didn't have before. So it definitely makes sense that this didn't come up in research because it's not a problem that they yet have.
Okay.
So they'll start to have it once we start to enforce storage limits on GitLab.com, for example. Now, if you're talking to self-managed users, this is definitely a problem for them, but the audience is typically going to be your GitLab administrator or your DevOps engineer who is responsible for the billing and costs around storage and compute. So if you're only talking to a test engineer or you're only talking to a developer, really unlikely that they're going to care about storage because they're not the persona or the role responsible for maintaining those costs there.
Okay. That clears that up. And that's probably not the personas that right now we're not targeting the admin, right? With this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we will be, like, with all of the work that we've been doing around bulk delete and supporting usability of artifact management, which is also like a dog fooding initiative. So the admins we're talking to are really like our delivery team, our infrastructure team, our database team. And all those mechanisms are informed by our internal use cases, and then they'll apply to the greater use cases. But in the end, like, self-managed users get to configure however they want retention policies, automatic deletion. We just need to provide the tools to help those admins execute that.
Okay. There's a lot. I keep having ideas break off my head, but there's one other bigger thing that I wanted to talk about, which was when artifacts came up in container registry and packages. Was that more of just people using the word artifacts to represent the package rather than actually thinking about or build artifacts?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So they were definitely referring to binaries, like any sort of software binary that is built and delivered, which it's like all the images that are stored and delivered inside of a container or package registry. So you're absolutely right that is really tailored toward what people consider a software binary, and less about how we currently define job and pipeline outputs.
Okay. I guess, does that mean that we just like ignore that, or?
Well, it's a nomenclature that we have to be aware of, because if we think about it, we're being more specific with the flavor of artifact.
Yeah.
So we're talking about job and then pipeline artifacts, which then can eventually become that software package that gets delivered, right? So
Yeah.
like, it's not, I don't think they have to be, the things that we build for pipeline and job artifacts aren't going to exclude package artifacts. Like, you're still going to need to maintain and analyze those and think about them. But if we take a step back and look at like what's happening with the artifacts in the package work stream, they already have all of their policies for like cleaning up packages because they're stored in a different part of the database in the application. So they're treated differently. They have their own rules. People know that those are a different flavor of artifact, and we don't really document them as an artifact. That's just like what people use as a part of the software language.
Okay.
And I think in our build artifacts page, if it's helpful, we can always cross-link the package direction and kind of explain why packages are different than artifacts. We have like, for more information about storing containers or packages, or see the package stage direction page. So like, we do reference like, hey, go here if you're looking for this kind of artifact, but we can be more explicit about if you're thinking about binaries that are produced after the build process for software delivery, you are likely thinking of package, and here's the direction. If you think that would be helpful in being more explicit here.
That's a good question. I think I thought that they overlapped with each other, but that doesn't mean that others do. And also, sorry, the machines are starting up again next door. So I don't know. It seems like maybe it was just a me thing. Maybe not users.
I think users also, like, maybe if you're talking to a DevOps engineer, maybe to them pipeline artifacts and packages are the same.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe that's an area that I need to just look into more because I didn't.
Or I mean, taking a step back, we can also just focus very narrowly on how are developers using job and pipeline artifacts, and just focus on that subset. And then as we start to advance our maturity and our usability of build artifacts, extend toward DevOps engineers and infrastructure operators and that kind of persona. I don't think there's a need to like exhaust the definition of artifact right now.
Yes, I agree. I am looking more into all of these different comments for the different categories, and I really think that starting with like an MVC of an event log or an audit log, like you were saying, would help us like invest or solve, maybe not solve, but partially solve a lot of these. But I don't think it needs, like, I think it needs to be things that are actions that are taken through the UI, but also stuff that's generated on the back end. And I think that that could also help us build like a structure for being able to then start solving the pipeline, like how they're included in different pipelines. If that makes any sense. So not just like somebody deleted this artifact or this was generated on this date, but being able to say this came from this pipeline and maybe even connecting it back from a commit.
Yeah, so if we think about the different series of events, we would have user generated events and then system generated events. So having head of GitLab for artifact behaviors, I think would be helpful. So I'll create an epic on under our artifact traceability epic for event audit logs for artifacts. And then we'll have 2 sub epics, one on user generated and one on system generated logging. And then we can flesh out the issues and the MVCs there.
Perfect. Okay, that sounds great. I can add more specific like portions that came from this issue and just put them over there too, so that we can
link them. That's
yeah.
Perfect. If I was to like distill what I think are the top 3 priorities for us to pursue with artifacts, I would say that it's debugging capabilities from artifacts, event logging with artifacts, and storage management. So I think those are the top 3 priorities that we have to solve. And like the debugging portion is that workflow of like pipelines, examining failures in pipelines, analyzing coverage, like it's all of these when it comes to debugging. Because like how do we think about what's happening in our pipelines and our tests related to artifacts? And then compliance, deployments, and security, as well as traceability, are going to be with auditing and event logs. As an MVC, then we need to get better about surfacing those connections inside of the UI.
Yeah, the only area that I see pipelines today, or I mean artifacts today, is from a pipeline, literally just like the download button. And then other than that, if I didn't know, if I was not aware that our tests were generated from artifacts, then I wouldn't know that.
Right.
Just don't make it obvious. And that goes for any other, I guess, analysis portion.
That makes sense. Okay, that's super helpful. Okay, I think we're over time. But,
yeah.
But thank you so much, Gina. Your research was super helpful. I'll get started on those epics. And you'll probably notice that I'm pinging you a bunch on a bunch of other epics too, because I'm doing like a mass reorganization of all of our categories and our like thinking about things exist today and creating new epics. So I'll get that for event logging. And then we can, when we have our Think Big with the team, we'll also get their thoughts on what are ways to quickly surface traceability insights inside of the UI. Because I think like that, if there's quick wins that we can show there, where we're just exposing things to users, I think that will really help I think it'll really help the build artifact category. Awesome.
Agreed. Thanks for setting up the Think Big. I'm excited for.
Yeah, I'll get that scheduled. I haven't scheduled it yet. Awesome. Thanks, Gina.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.